Rachel just hacked the ACT in order to score a 34, and we're breaking down exactly how she did it so you can pretty much just copy her. And it's not like she got there easily. For a while, her score was stuck down at a 30, and it wasn't until she found out about ACT hacking that her score finally jumped up to that 34. So we're going to dive into exactly what she was doing wrong and then what she did to hack the ACT instead. Now this is a massive outcome here for Rachel. Going from a 30 to a 34 is a completely life-changing score improvement. While a 30 is a great score on the ACT, if you're really looking to get into a top college like an Ivy League school or like MIT or Stanford or something along those lines, then having a 30 is actually a bit of a question mark, and it can hold you back from actually getting your application even looked at some of those schools. And outside of the Ivy League, at other top 50 schools, a 30 is probably good enough to get you looked at, but it's not enough to guarantee admissions, and it's definitely not enough to get a good scholarship at those schools. On the other hand, that 34 that Rachel has now is strong enough to get her foot in the door at all of those Ivy League and pretty much any school that she could possibly want to go to. A 34 on the ACT checks the box academically at any school in the country. So that's where they'll really take a look at the rest of your application. Whereas with that 30 that she had beforehand, it would have been a struggle to just get the rest of her application even looked at. So if you want to improve your ACT score in order to get into one of those top level elite schools or earn scholarship dollars at another top 50 school, then you're definitely going to want to pay attention to this video. And even if you're not looking to get into one of those top level schools, this video will still apply to you, because this is actually a very similar process to another student that I had, Ava, who went from a 22 up to a 30. So no matter where you are in your ACT process, this video will help you get to your target score. So now let's get into the step-by-step process of how Rachel went from that 30 to the 34. And we should start by looking at what she was doing to prepare for the test when she was stuck at that 30. Let's listen to what Rachel herself had to say about her process when she was at that 30, because she was making some very, very common mistakes that everybody seems to be making. Yeah, so I guess that gets into another question. It's like, what were you doing to prepare, like, I guess before we started working together?
I just got one of those books. Like, I got one of the books and I was just doing the practice tests and like the explanations and stuff.
And this is one of the most common mistakes that I see out there. A lot of students want to just get these ACT prep booklets and work through the practice tests and then look at the solutions to their incorrect answers. And that is a massive mistake, and it's just a huge waste of time. When Rachel was doing this, as with almost every single student who uses these prep booklets, all they're doing is they're taking the test, they're looking at the solutions, and they're basically just spoon feeding themselves the correct answers. Or if they have a tutor, they're having the tutor spoon feed them the correct answers without going through the actual process of learning and recognizing different question types. And now the next mistake that she was making is she wasn't taking these practice tests in a realistic testing environment. So she wasn't necessarily being too strict on the timing of herself, and she wasn't taking these tests by using a realistic bubble sheet as well. So this was significantly throwing off her timing when she went from the practice test to the real ACT. Because again, if we're not strict on our timing and we're not using a bubble sheet, the bubble sheet is a big thing that a lot of people don't realize. But if you think about it, on the English section alone, you have 75 bubbles that you have to fill in. Even if you just took a blank bubble sheet right now and all you did was just fill in like A for every single answer, that would probably take you about 5 minutes to fill in the 75 bubbles that you need to do. So the fact that she wasn't taking these practice tests in a realistic environment meant that she wasn't actually preparing herself for test day. And now the last big thing that I think she was missing out on was that she wasn't actually reviewing her answers in depth and recognizing that there were certain question types on the ACT. So she was, again, just looking at the solutions and not really paying too much attention to the types of questions she was missing, and not really recognizing the fact that there are certain categories of questions that she needed to be working on. And so just to quickly summarize what her problems were before she found ACT hacking, she was taking practice tests from a prep booklet and having the answers just spoon-fed directly to her. She was not taking these practice tests in a realistic testing environment, and she really had no approach to recognizing and then solving specific question types. So after Rachel was stuck at a 30 for a while and was struggling to make any improvement at all, she reached out to me and she joined my ACT coaching program, where we went through the method of ACT hacking. So first things first, what we had to do together was we kind of had to throw out a lot of her old practice tests that she had done because they weren't done in a realistic setting. And I had to give her a realistic ACT diagnostic test which she actually took, again, under the actual conditions of the ACT as closely as we could make it as possible. Then with that practice test, we identified all of her highest priority items that we needed to work on first. So rather than just willy-nilly explaining all of the solutions to her, we identified all of the question types that she was missing most frequently and that we could improve on most easily, and we started by working on those question types. And then in order to actually make the improvement, we had to get Rachel to understand why she missed each question and also how to recognize the question type in order for us to actually solve those questions most efficiently the next time that we saw them show up on the ACT. And the way that we got Rachel to actually improve is we got her to recognize certain question types when they showed up. So not just having me spoon feed her the correct answers and spoon feed her what type of question it was, but get her to recognize those on her own and then actually have the most efficient method of solving those question types, again, on her own, rather than just having me explain the most efficient way and spoon feed it to her. And don't just take my word for it, because I have a video where Rachel and I were talking about the exact process that she went through. And there were a couple of things that she mentioned. First thing was that she specifically mentioned that I wasn't spoon feeding the answers to her. She knew that she was actually going through the process of true learning by not just having the answers spoon fed to her, but instead recognizing her own mistakes and coming up with a process for improving on those mistakes the next time.
Oh yeah, when we were correcting the tests, if I got a question wrong, I'd try and redo it to see if I could figure out my own mistake, and then I'd be explained why I made the mistake I made, instead of just being told what the right answer was and leaving it at that.
And the second thing that she mentioned is that we didn't just go through this process on the questions that she was missing. We also found ways to improve on the questions that she was actually getting correct, but maybe wasn't answering as efficiently as possible.
Even if I got them right, if they were known to be hard questions, you still explained it all to me.
And then the third thing that she specifically mentioned was that we ingrained these proper habits again and again in a realistic practice test setting, so that by the time she got to the test center, there was literally nothing she even had to think about. She just saw everything on the test, recognized what types of questions they were, and then knew the exact process that she needed to go through in order to answer them correctly.
And so by the time I got to the test, I had basically seen and had the explanation for almost every single question.
So with just these couple tweaks that are all part of the ACT hacking method, Rachel jumped up from a 30 to a 34.
So before I started meeting, I had a 30 with all the practice tests and stuff, but then after our preparation, a couple months probably, I got a 34.
And again, this now drastically improves Rachel's odds at getting into an Ivy League school and also earning top scholarships at top 50 schools outside of the Ivy League. So the key takeaways from Rachel's experience are that we need to be practicing in a realistic practice setting. We need to not be spoon-fed the correct answers over and over again by a prep booklet or an ACT tutor, and then we need to also find the most efficient way of solving all of the problems and ingrain that process so that it becomes second nature on test day. And again, these are principles that apply to all students across the board on the ACT. Whether you're trying to go from a 30 to a 34, or you're like Ava and you're just trying to go from a 22 to a 30. Or if you're lower than that and you're starting out at an 18 and you need to go up to a 26. These same methods will apply no matter where you're starting out and where you're trying to head. Now, if you want me to personally take your student by the hand and guide them through this ACT hacking process from start to finish, then check out the description down below this video where you can apply to join my ACT coaching program. Everything is personalized to each student and what they need specifically, and I work with every student on an individual basis. So what we'll do is we'll set up a Zoom call to brainstorm the best plan for your specific situation. Now, in that description, there might be a link to an application form. If there's not one there, then you can also just go over to my Instagram page and message me the word boost to my direct messages. That lets me know that you want to join the coaching program. I respond to all messages on Instagram already, but that bumps you up to the top of the list, and that's how I know that we'll be wanting to brainstorm a plan together. And if you want to just keep learning for free, then stay tuned to my channel right here on YouTube and over on Instagram, where I'm putting out a ton of content on getting better ACT scores, getting into the best colleges, and earning the most amount of scholarships. So stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one.